October?
Yes.
6th? Okay. So it's October 6th. It's just after 7:30. We were wanting to start at 7:30, and we've got everybody on here just waiting for everybody to get everything set. I want to take less than 2 minutes here to point out some little quick business that's going on. We have invited a food truck to come into the neighborhood for the 10th. That is the pizza food truck. I totally forgot their name. Something fire.
Fire.
I don't know. Thank you. Yeah, something on my
October
fire.
10th.
Yeah, so they're coming in to the neighborhood. That was something I was able to set up. We got reached out. Somebody was reaching out to me. I totally forgot who it was. My brain. Shane's Rib Shack reached out. I guess somebody in the neighborhood had let them know, hey, we're still bringing food trucks and stuff if they want. They reached out. I said, that's fine. Send me the info. That's going to be, I think, on October the 28th. So I'll put that out as soon as Shane sends me their
Go
stuff.
back into that message. I think you gotta click the button in that message to book.
Are you talking about my message?
No, the Glen, the association. It says book. She sent something.
Well, I'll check to make sure that that's not turned
Yeah.
on then, because they just need to listen know.
Okay.
What was the other thing I want to mention?
You said October 28th. That's a Wednesday.
I think it's October the 28th. I'll put an official
Okay.
message out about that on Facebook. Just letting people know we are still trying to bring different things to the neighborhood. And the pool project has moved along. There's concrete that's been put down up there. I think most people have noticed. And Eric, when's the delivery of the shed?
Shed is Thursday. To do the other section of concrete, it looks like it's going to be easier for them to take down one section on the pool side and then pour from there and then wheelbarrow if they need to. So they're probably going to just end up putting back up that fence section when they do take down the other one and then pour from the other side to do the rest of it. But they've got to move the dirt pile tomorrow so we can get the shed truck in. Originally, we thought they'd be able to clear it out, but since they're going to come in from the other side of the concrete, they're just going to wait to do the prep. So I don't really care. It's closed anyway. So as long as we can get the shed in there, that was the biggest thing, getting the shed in there and then still doing the concrete.
To that point, do you have any idea, when did you start on that project, trying to get that done? Do you remember? Like I was going to say it was I remember we went looking at sheds a long time ago. So it was very quickly.
We actually went and bought the shed at the end of March.
That's so it shows you how long. And so I wanted to point that out, that this year has been the year of Eric. He has put in, I don't know how many hours between redoing the dirt over by that sidewalk over there and building the shed thing and getting all the project done and unknown amount of hours. What's that?
All the contracts.
Yeah, we spent hours and hours and hours on contracts. We sent to Eric. He's actually reviewing, if he's even got a chance to even glance at it yet, AMG's new contract.
Yeah, that thing's a mess. I gave it like an hour and a half. I got to go back through it.
I told her it was gonna be a mess once I got a chance to look over it and put it through. I was like, it's not gonna just sail through the board, but it's so there's that. Then there is what we're gonna talk about tonight, which is the main focus of everything. And then after I'm done here, I'm just gonna basically hit mute and listen for the rest of the evening. We had asked Eric to look at the possibility of splitting the townhomes out. This is something we talked about in the past. Eric came back and said, hey, I think according to the way the rules read and everything, it should be split out. We've had people in the neighborhood argue, hey, why don't you split it out? So Eric has spent, I don't even want to, I'm glad they're not billable hours, Eric. That's all I have to say. So it has been a lot of Eric work. Now, obviously, everybody on the board has put a lot of effort on landscaping and some other contract issues we were all working for. And I truly thank all of you. I know before we started, Meg was saying she felt like she hadn't contributed as much. Each of you guys have contributed, but I think we all agree this has been the year of Eric. So, we'll like go out, clap for Eric there. And then I'll turn it over to Eric, and I'm going to mute.
Meg, did you send me the screen share?
Yeah. You have the option.
Where at?
You should.
I don't see it.
You have the green button down at the bottom.
Oh, there we go. Is it recording? I have a record option too. Or is that me recording?
I'm recording it.
I need to share this one. So quick question, when I change to this, does your screen change too, or do I have to log out and log back in to change this?
No, we see it.
All right. So we are good to go. I'll just close out this window so I can see it better. All right, so we'll just start. This is the agenda for tonight. You can ask questions as you need to. Basically what we're looking at is just breaking down the budget so everyone can see what they're responsible for, so the townhome owners know, like, hey, this goes to our actual expenses for the year. This goes into reserve savings for X, Y, and Z for everybody across the board. So I know all the board members have looked at the articles and the CCRs, but this is just generally on here for people in the neighborhood to find relevant sections if they need to. Article 5, Section 2 is the purpose of the annual assessments. Pretty straightforward. Article 5, Section 3 is the max assessments. There is a max assessment calculator. So for 2021, the maximum allowable for the townhomes is $2,847. For the single families, it's basically $950. The reason that the townhomes are going to need to be increased is to avoid having to do a special assessment if we have to do roof repairs or major repairs that are townhome specific, because it needs 67% approval. And if they do not get 67% approval, they're either not getting it covered because the money's not there, or they're going to have somebody try to sue the board to get them to do it. And then we're still going to have to charge them both for the court cost and for making the improvements, because it needs to get paid for and fixed if it's like a roof or some other major repair. But we can go through that in the reserve study a little bit later. Article 4, Section 5B basically just says that the townhome maintenance is subject to assessment. So stuff like the painting, pressure washing, general maintenance stuff, that if someone writes in and says, hey, I've got a roof leak, that's supposed to be subject to assessments. Article 4, Section 7 is the one that says that the reserve fund that is required by our bylaws has to be for common areas. What we started doing with the reserve fund, which I'll get into later on, is it became kind of a joint bucket based on the reserve study. But the reserve study was for all future major expenditures and wasn't specifically for just the common areas. It was for everything that the HOA would have to pay out for. So that's where it kind of got a little mixed up over the last few years when the reserve study was done. So essentially what we're looking to do is have the townhomes pay a higher assessment, but they'll specifically know that they're paying into their own savings account. So it's not getting spent on common stuff. It's not getting spent on something at the pool. It's specifically only for things at the townhomes. So the historic budget one, just to give a quick background, 2018 is probably the earliest I was going to go, just because that's when I was starting to get on the board. It was always broken down into a single family amount, a townhome amount, then the combined total of what was getting paid, and then what was being saved for reserves. So we had the operating cost and then the reserve cost. And we always had it broken down on the side with what single families paid and what townhomes paid. The issue we were running into is the townhomes were like, hey, we're paying a lot more. And the budget wasn't showing why they were paying more. It was just kind of an unwritten rule that, hey, most of landscaping, most of the trash, well, pretty much all the trash, the insurance, the bulk of that expense is solely townhomes. It's not for common stuff, but there was nothing ever showing that. So for 2018, 2019, it was the same thing where it's like, hey, this is what our provision for reserves is. It also wasn't broken down at all. So it wasn't like the single families are going to put X amount toward the reserves and the townhomes are putting X amount. So you kind of knew how much people paid in. It was all just a lump sum. And that was done in 2018 when we got the updated reserve study, which we'll get into a little bit later as well. But that's where we started running into the issues, was that people would say like, hey, we're paying too much or someone's not paying enough, but there was no way to actually show what was getting spent where and why it was being charged that way, because it was all lumped together. So 2020 was the first time we started breaking down some stuff. So our 2020 budget has the split. I actually recalculated the breakdown based on how much was left over based on the actual expenses. So that's why there's a slight adjustment by about $5,000 in the amount getting contributed to the reserves for 2020. But this one had trash broken down where the townhomes were responsible for like 64 out of the 65 slots because there's 64 townhomes they pick up at the pool. So we just made it 64 out of 65, and then the common was the other one. Everything else got split. If you see the number at the top here, so anything the townhome was responsible for was 64 out of 295. The amount single family is responsible for was the number of units divided by the total number of units. So anything that was everything shared, nothing could be split up, got divided individually by a house, everybody paid the same. Anything that was specifically more for the townhomes got divided out. So landscaping contract, I think that got split 55-45 based on a recommendation by the landscaper. I just did the trash one. Tree removal and trimming got split because that was mostly in the townhome areas around their units that were needing to get trimmed. The one that we added new because it was a massive issue when I went back through the budgets was townhome maintenance. We used to have general maintenance and then subtags for townhomes and common, but it all got lumped into general maintenance. The bulk of that was for the townhomes. So for 2020, we budgeted $6,000, but it was already at, that's not even the projected, that's the month's actuals for this one. So the month actual, it's already at over 10,000. And if we include the repairs that were done for the painting and pressure washing aspect of the that project that we just did, it's like another 10,000. So we're in like $20,000 into just repairs on townhomes. So that's going to have to be a bigger item moving forward. They're probably not going to have another $20,000 expense because we're finding everything that hadn't been fixed over the last couple of years. But that will probably need to be increased going forward as well. That's the main ones. So you have any questions on just kind of how it was done in the past before I go into the 2021 budget? Nope. Okay. So for 2021, the way I have this broken down, we'll just start over here. So it's the same setup as all the other ones but I also put in our 2020 budget, what we actually budgeted, projected for 2020. So this is taking our actual expenses through August and then multiplying it out to make it a full year. So there's going to be a slight difference there. And then I based the 2021 budget off of that. So there's not really anything crazy to get lost in the weeds other than our operating budget is going to go up based on what we need to pay in to the reserves. Right now, we're not going to worry about the reserve contribution because that is going to change based on how we decide how to break down some of the expenses later on. But generally, if you just look at the expenses, so column E is the 2021 expenses, F and G are the townhomes and single families. The red ones are the ones that are complete, they're locked in. That's what the budget's going to be. Rob, do you know if trash is going to go up at all? Or if it's going to stay the same for 2021?
I do not anticipate the trash going up as of right now. If it does, it would be a small increase, but that's also a very heavily negotiated deal. So I'll let you know.
Okay.
But originally he wanted $1,200 a month, I think. And what do we pay, $900?
Yeah, we paid $900 because it's 1080.
Yeah. So I don't anticipate it to go up anywhere near $1,200, but I'll keep you apprised.
Okay. So the red ones are pretty much set. The other ones may need some tweaking, but it's generally close to either what we had before or the breakdown. So for 2021, we actually had the landscapers split their own contract. So they have a contract that's just for the townhome area and a contract that's for all the common open spaces. So that's why the landscaping is going to look a little bit different this year. So for the townhomes part, they're solely responsible for the common. That's the one that's divided by the per unit basis. So whatever the number of units are divided by 295 is how that gets split. Same thing, miscellaneous landscape, general maintenance split the same. We can decide if we want to keep townhome maintenance the same or reduce it, but we're already over 10. We're probably looking at 20 plus this year, but that won't be the same going forward. Full contract split evenly. So the four main areas that are going to get split that are going to be townhome heavy is going to be the trash, the landscaping, the townhome maintenance, because that's fixing the townhomes. And then the insurance, which I think that's down lower. So most people don't look into our insurance policies, but we have to have, see if I wrote it down, what all of our insurance covers. But it's liability for the property. It's D&O insurance, which is the one that's gets split as the common expense. And then the rest of it is property insurance that's on the townhome. So that's why the bulk of that expense is a townhome expense. And that was the breakdown that was given to us from the insurance company. Said this amount is to cover the townhome property, and then the other amount is the amount to cover the D&O and the general liability insurance on the property. So that's why.
Eric, without having to go into too much detail, can you? I know most people are going to go, "What's a D&O?" Can you very quickly just hit what each of those are for specifically?
Yep. So the D&O is directors and officers insurance. It just covers board members if someone sues the board or says that specifically me or Rob or Virginia or Meg, someone did something and you're going to sue us over our actions for what we did as a board member on Almond Glen. It provides coverage for that. So the HOA is not paying out of pocket if someone decides to sue us. The general liability is basically like accident insurance. So if someone gets injured at the pool or someone, it's really probably going to be mainly pool injuries, but any injury that happens on the property that needs coverage. Same thing you have at your house. If someone comes over and breaks their arm, you actually could use your liability insurance to help cover their cost. And then the property insurance is what's covering the outsides and the roofs for the townhome. So the parts that the HOA is responsible for by the bylaws, that's the insurance coverage on that. So if, God forbid, there's one of the sections gets a fire, it's going to pay to repair all that damages that happens to those townhomes. That's why the townhome owners, I would assume, just have some sort of limited insurance policy that just covers their inside and aren't paying for extra coverage they don't need. So if you are a townhome owner, you have full insurance coverage on your entire building, you may want to look into tweaking that and save some money. Side note. So that's insurance. Everything else is pretty much a straightforward breakdown. But the big number to look at here is the breakdown of the total expenses and what each group needs to pay for actual expenses. So this is just covering your actual expenses, not covering anything into the reserves. It's $1,690 for the townhomes and $485 for the single family. So that is why the townhomes are so much higher and why it needs to be even higher, so they can be putting money away for the big ticket item repairs for the reserve study. As last year, their contribution was $1,920. So based on what they're paying in, it's only what, $700, like $230 a house into the reserve fund total. So that's less than about $20,000 going to put away for all the savings, when like 70% of the reserve account expenses are townhome expenses. So that's the big reason why the townhomes are going to have to go up, based on not adjusting anything, because we're going to make an adjustment for how the reserve account is broken out. And we're also going to make an adjustment for how one of the big ticket line items is on the reserve study. But that's the two things that everyone needs to be thinking about. But based on just the average study that I put together, it's looking like it's got to go up almost 50% to just cover cost. It won't be quite that high, based on how we decide to divide the two budgets and how we decide to divide the one expenditure line item, which is the asphalt. But without taking those into account, it's going to be a very big increase just to cover cost and what they need to put into reserves. So, does anyone have any questions on that? Oop. All right, so we'll switch spreadsheets. This is the spreadsheet that's available on the website. It is the general 2018 reserve study. So it has a big PDF. If you want to go through the whole thing, it has a breakdown of what each one of these expenses are that you'll see on these line items. It also has, so it'll have a description, it'll have what this is, it'll have the cost, and it has a timeline for when the costs are supposed to be. This spreadsheet is just a breakdown of this one's going to be the expenditures, the next one's going to be the funding plan. So the initial plan in 2018 was, hey, you need to cover all these costs. This is when you're going to get hit with these expenses, anticipated wise. So you need to be saving up to be able to cover these costs. And this is our big one, this 549, so 550,000, which is the asphalt pavement. So this is a total replacement. Essentially, when I mapped it out, which I'll go back to the other one when we get to that part, it's from Allendale and then up and all the way through the whole townhome areas. So that's the one that is going to have to get somehow broken down, and I've got a couple different options, but that'll be one of the things that'll offset how much the townhomes need to be putting into reserves and how much single family does when we break that down. Because personally, I don't think that's all the townhome expense. We just got to figure out how that needs to get broken down. The funding plan initially in 2014 and 2018 had a progressive assessment. So we'll stick with just the townhomes because it was all broken down. Townhomes and single family were separate. So we had the 46,000 had to get put in 2019, 46.8, and it stepped up all the way to 59,000 in 2033. And by the time we're at 2048, they're supposed to be putting in 77,000 a year. So if I'm remembering correctly with the 2018 board, when it got presented, it's like, well, that's kind of crazy to have them put in so little now compared to later, and they're going to get hammered on the back end. So that's why we had presented that budget where we made it all one amount and made it similar amount. I think it was like 70,000 every year. And that was the combined for both common and townhomes. What we're running into is if you look at the common one, it's a lot less total. So that's why we're having the one issue is that the total amount for the common anticipated expenditure is 850 some, total amount for the townhomes. Of course, it doesn't show up on that line item. That'd be too easy. It was like 101.5 million, something like that. But you can pull up the thing and look at it. I actually need to pull up the 2018 updated one. Might be this one that Sid did that has the combined one. Yeah, that's the same one. That'll be on this one. All right, yeah, so that's our 2018 one. Where's the one Sid did? Oh, I'll find it, put it on there if I need to. It's probably on the other main sheet. But that's what we're looking at for the reserves. It's just that's how it was originally broken down. In 2018, we combined it. And that's where we're running into a little bit of an issue because it got combined into being 70,000 each. I thought I had it on one of these two spreadsheets, but I'll have to find the one that it's actually on. But when we're looking at the reserve study, we have the contributions going into it. There were a couple issues. The first one was, this is the contribution calculator that I made up. This was a massive pain in the butt. But this was our end of year balances, column C, each year. So column B is what got paid in. In 2019, we back paid for 2018 and 2019. So in each of these years is almost like a year behind when we actually put the money in based on what the reserve study was. So we tried to put them both in 2019, just so that way it was actually hitting the budget in the same calendar year it was budgeted for. So in 2020, we would put in the 45,000 that's required to move up the end of the year balance. So the in-between years get a little dicey because, as I said before, those other budgets, we're putting in set amounts. So in 2017, 2018, 2019, it was all set amounts that got put in. So there was really no way to break it down and say, hey, this is how much the townhomes paid. Hey, this is how much the single families paid, because you just couldn't break it out of the budget. The other years, I think it's 2015. Yeah, so 2016, 2015, those ones did have breakdowns of what should have been getting put in and how much townhomes were putting in and how much the single families were putting in for the master. So that had the contribution breakdown. So how I calculated it for 2017 through 19, there's a couple different options that greatly impact the division between like having a community reserve account per the bylaws and then having what I'm just going to call a townhome savings account, which is going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars saved up for their specific projects that need to come out of the reserve study. Does that make sense for everybody, the breakdown between the reserve study and the actual reserve account? I just want to make sure it's not getting like lost in translation with when people actually watch this.
Works for me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
you're doing a job, Jerry.
Okay, so the way which someone can tell me this doesn't make sense and we need to do it a different way, but the way I decided to calculate the breakdown of 2017 through 2019 contributions wasn't based on the amount we paid in. It was based on the amount of money that was paid for that year in assessments, subtracted from whether single family or townhome, what their expenses were. So like for 2018, if we click on that, we have the general like, hey, this is our monthly budget, but then we also have how much did we actually spend? So we have the budget, we have the spent amount, which is almost identical in 2017 and 2018. In 2019, there's a significant difference. So in 2019, we're actually under budget. We had expenses that carried over to 2020 that we had to eat. But if you look at it in general, it's like 20-some thousand dollars under budget for 2019. So instead of trying to do it based on what we were supposed to pay into reserves, the way I calculated the breakdowns for the contributions was based on, it's line 23. So it's based on the actual assessments. So if you paid in $100,000 for, let's say the townhomes paid $100,000 and their actual expenses were only $40,000, then that gap of $60,000 would have been their contribution to the reserve fund, is how I calculated that out, because that made more sense. Because it looked like in the past, which is what's been happening for a few years, is when we had a budget that came in under what the budget was, so our actual expenses were under the budget, that money just kind of sat in the primary account and wasn't really accounted for in terms of what we were doing moving forward. So all that extra money that was sitting there is now getting pretty much divvied up between the common and the townhome. So the way I did it, hopefully that made sense so far, is I came up with 3 options. So option 1 would be to split it almost identical to how we do in 2021, where we take the townhome maintenance out because that had specific line items delineated for it, but they didn't hit the actual budget separately. The insurance, the landscaping, and the trash, and we divide it out just like the 2021 budget. So whatever percentage the landscaping would be the same percentage. Whatever percentage the insurance would be the same percentage based on the total dollar amount paid. So that would end up being a bigger burden on the townhomes, a lesser burden on the single family, but that's probably the most reflective of what actually had been getting paid in by each group. Option 2 was having it separated, but not including the insurance. Because I don't know if anyone actually knew that big of the insurance portion was only townhomes until we asked them a couple years ago to break it down for us into what actually was getting covered and who should be paying for it. So that has the same breakdown as 1, except insurance isn't included. And then the third option is it's split all per household. So if our total budget was $100,000 and we came in at $80,000, it got split evenly between all the households. Everybody paid the exact same amount, which meant everybody paid the exact same amount into reserves. So that actually ends up being significantly better for the townhomes because all the expenses are split evenly and they're not paying extra for their specific items. So that's the first decision that the board will have to make going into 2021, is how we want to do that initial division. So if you look at, this is basically the splits for all of them. So option 1, every one of them, the 08 through 16 is the same. So when that got calculated out, the common fund should have 147,000, townhome should have 86. So that's the base starting for everyone. If you look at line 30, what we got to decide between is how we want to divvy up the rest. So if we do option 1, which I'll just leave the whole thing on the screen if I one more notch down. There we go. So if we did option 1 where it was all split out per share, like exactly how it should be for 2021, where everybody's paying their own expenses, we end up with the common fund having 334,000, the townhome fund having 130,000. If we do option 2 where we don't include the insurance for those 3 years, it ends up as a 250,000, 210,000 split. If we do the one where we say, hey, those 3 years, everything got divided evenly and they paid a whole bunch more in dues, which realistically doesn't make a ton of sense because it says that the common fund ends up owing money in those 2 years because enough didn't get paid in. It all got paid by townhomes. Then we end up with, oh, that number's wrong here. I'll just auto sum this. It'll be a big number. Oh, there we go. Yeah, 309. So we're good. Does that make sense for everybody? How I did those 2 splits or 3 splits? Yay, nay. Everybody's asleep.
Yeah.
No, we're just. I was just looking. I was just making sure.
So that's just going to be the first decision as a board we're going to have to make. So I don't know if we can flag this time in the video so people can go look at like, hey, this is the screen. This is the 3 options. Here's the breakdown. You can state your case for whichever one you think it should be.
We have this in our email, right, Eric?
Yes, everybody has this email. We'll probably make this whole document or the bulk of it public on the website too, so people can access it and have the information at hand when they're trying to look at this.
Okay.
But that'll be the first decision because based on that split is the starting amount when we split the current reserve fund and do a townhome one and a common one. So that'll make a big difference on what the annual contribution needs to be to hit the dollar amount targets over the course of the next 30, 40 years. So we don't need to make a decision on it now. It just needs to get flagged that that's what we need to think about, get some feedback from the community. And then that's the first big decision we'll have to make. The next one will be that reserve account, the reserve account asphalt. We even need this one. Oh, so this will be on there too so people can look at it. So this is the adjusted reserve account split. So essentially we took the reserve account from 2018 and there were a couple expenses that were like, you know what, that's not really a townhome expense. So we moved it down into the single family expense. So that's how this initially got broken down. And that is on this page. The ones that got moved over are highlighted. So these in the initial study were, so the 44 through 47, these were townhome expenses. And as a board, we were like, well, that's kind of silly that they would be responsible for like every catch basin and the concrete of the curbs or simple things like that, like a fence that was around the trash enclosure. Like we were keeping the wood fence, we got rid of the trash enclosure part. So that made a couple adjustments. The big one that we still need to deal with is that the asphalt total replacement, which is the big one. The other one will be the asphalt paving and repair. So I didn't even bother trying to factor in to give options for the paving and repairs section of it, which is 150,000, until we make a decision on what we're doing with the roads. So when we look at this asphalt section next, it'll be tweaked a little bit more, and no matter which one we pick, in the favor of the townhomes paying a little bit less, because whatever we say is going to be contributed to the common one, will take over part of that 550 and part of the 150. But when I did the initial breakdown, just to have people look at it to make a decision, I only took into account the 550. So the asphalt map, these overlays, if you want to try to do it, good luck. I got almost dead nuts on the 9,750 that they had once I went all the way down to Allendale. So I called the county, called DPW. They think that what HOA owns is pretty much down to Allendale, because they said the county owns Allendale, the county owns the rest of Caprington. So like we're assuming that the division point is Allendale. So we took Caprington Lane. So initially I had it where it stopped at, I think it was Broughton maybe. No, Dunrobin. So I had it stopped at Dunrobin. And then after I talked to the county, it was another 475 square feet. So here is our asphalt map, round one of me trying to use a sod website and map all this out. So it uses a couple green spaces that I ended up taking out later. But map one was pretty much everything. Map two was just the parking lots, because that's what I was going to use for the different options. So in case anyone looks at it, like, okay, this guy actually spent all the time to click the mouse on all these stupid things and figure out how to make 15 overlays, which seems easy until you start doing it. It's really a pain in the ass. But that's how the asphalt mapping worked. These are the breakdowns of the roads. I didn't know what we were going to do with the dumpster area, so I just included it. But the asphalt options, I have 4 options for us. Option 1 would be it all stays a townhome expense, which I don't think is right, but it's going to be a board decision. So if everything stayed a townhome expense, townhomes are responsible for $550,000. Like I said before, we would also have to factor in that 150 breakdown. If we say the entire Caprington Lane or Drive or whatever it's called, I live on it, don't even know what the end of it is. If we say Caprington only is going to be common, and then all the side roads, so Lanark, Dunrobin, Burke Hill, if we say all those in their parking spots will be townhomes, but we'll say that all of Caprington is going to count as common, then that's the breakdown.
I'm sorry, Eric. I probably don't understand something in the map. Is by the map everything is townhomes there?
This map, well, if you look at, so here, look up here. So this is a breakdown of each overlay. So on the first map, overlay 1 is Caprington Drive. Overlay 2 is Channing. So when you look down here, they're labeled. So overlay 1 is Caprington going all the way down through here. Overlay 2 is this section of Channing. Overlay 3 is this area. And I went back in the second map when I did the parking spots to get an accurate amount. And in this one, I took out all the little median strips, everything else. So that's how I know that the numbers are accurate, because I compared them and I subtracted that out. So in the first option, so option 1 would be everything including Caprington is paid for by townhomes. That's how the reserve study was broken down. And that's why they're right now supposed to be contributing a ton of money into reserve. That they're not, but I think we need to break it out. So if we say every single road, so the entire townhome area, all the parking spots, and Caprington Road all the way to Allendale is what the reserve study says right now. It says all that is a townhome expense. So the option 2 I created was that we take out the square footage for Caprington from the total, which makes it 25% common, 75% townhome. So common, so single families, townhomes, everyone's responsible for that $135,000 expense. And then the townhomes would be responsible for the $415,000 expense. The third option would be we say, hey, all the roads should be a common expense, but the parking spots, we can't justify single family homeowners paying for parking spots that are exclusively used by the townhomes. So that's when I made the second map, because I had nothing else to do that day except make maps all day. Hopefully my company I work for doesn't see this video and realize I was making maps all day. But this is where I took the square footage of the parking, and you see the total area over here. I don't know if you can see it to the, where I'm swinging my mouse around to the left. So it's 3,224 square yards is just the parking spots. Now, give or take, this may be within like 20 to 50 square feet, because this is me like drawing boxes on a map that can't zoom in super tight. And I just realized right now I missed that parking spot, so it'll probably be a little bit more. But it's just a rough estimate to give everybody an idea of. So if we say it's all the parking spots are townhomes, but everything else is common, it ends up being a 67% to 33% breakdown on the square footage. So that would be a $368,000 common expense and $180,000 exclusive townhome expense. The fourth option would be we say all the asphalt, including the parking spots, is common. Everybody's going to have to pay for it, and then it all becomes a common expense. So that is the second major decision that the board's going to have to make in the next month to finalize the 2021 budget, because that's going to make a massive impact on how the reserves need to be contributed to for the common and the townhomes. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Should I take that as everybody's thinking, or yes, we can keep going?
I'm good. It makes sense.
Okay.
Great
Yeah,
job.
makes sense.
for
I
doing all-
actually missed the question. I was looking for some Prilosec. What
Well,
was
it's
the
really just if
question?
you understand that, hey, that's the four options, and we're going to have to pick some version of one of those.
Oh, yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Reserves.
I'm in.
All right,
Wow,
so that's
thanks for
really,
doing all that, Eric.
yeah. So big summary breakdown, two main decisions. One's going to be this, obviously, and the other one's going to be that other breakdown and how we're going to split out the initial starting monies for the reserve account based on those other three options I gave, or unless someone has a completely different idea they want to use. But just to give you a ballpark example of the asphalt impact, just taking into account those four options to try to have, and all these are based on, so our current reserve account basically had the townhomes funded down under 100,000 after 2048 with the big expense, which doesn't make a ton of sense because there's going to be a bunch more expenses coming after that too. There's always something you got to pay for. So I was trying to keep all of them around like 240 to 250,000. So with option one, the townhomes would have to be contributing 62,000 a year. And this is just assuming we start them at 220. I just picked it because it was that middle number, just to give us a ballpark. So this is just showing the impact of that asphalt. So if the asphalt is all townhomes, they're got to contribute 62,000 a year to cover expenses. If we go with option two, it's 57,000 to their savings account. If it's option three, it's 50. If it's option four, where single families and everyone's also covering the parking spaces, it's 44. So it's going to be a massive impact on the townhomes because it's looking at, what is that, $18,000 a year that they have to be putting away difference based on which one we pick. So I'm assuming we're going to land somewhere in the middle, and then when we make the adjustments, it'll bring it down. But the same thing happens with a single family. So anyone that's sitting at home looking at like, hey, these numbers don't make sense. Like, it's not going to be perfectly exact. So I didn't break it all down because I only spent hundreds of hours on this. I don't going to spend any more. But so option one, the single families would be paying plus the townhomes paying in the common account would be 25,000. If they're responsible for the entire asphalt, then they'd be paying 43,000. We'll probably land somewhere in the middle. So that's why we're going to have to make those two decisions with the starting account number. Because in this one, I just went with the 265 and the 220. But the amount for the contribution is going to change based on what we pick for the starting amount in each account and what we pick for how we're going to fund the asphalt, who's responsible for what.
So the only expense for this area that we're discussing is asphalt?
Yes, this is the asphalt, full asphalt repavement in 2048. So in 2048, it's like $550,000 to replace all the asphalt from, well, I don't even have it on the second map there because I made a new map with Capricorn. Basically, all this asphalt everywhere in the townhome areas, all these roads, all the way down to Allendale. Replacing all that is estimated at $550,000, which is our biggest single year expenditure from the reserve study. So that
Just,
we need to figure out how that needs to be broken down and make that known to everyone else versus just going off of, hey, this is what the reserve study says. We went through and broke down exactly what the line items were and what they were to figure out who should be paying. And personally, I don't think the townhomes should solely be responsible for the entire road to Caprington Drive that everybody uses. So that's what we have to just decide on, to break that out a little bit better. So everybody's like, hey, this is what we're paying for. This is the savings account just for townhomes stuff. This is the saving account for all the common stuff. And there aren't any questions about what people are paying for anymore.
So Eric, the reserve study is for actually all asphalt in 2048. We just discussing townhomes because it sounds like an area that we need to split, right?
No, the 900 and was it 97,000? 9,750 square feet. The 900, get rid of that.
Yeah,
It's only for, so
it's only for townhomes.
we are responsible for as an HOA is the roads that we own.
Okay,
The county owns Allendale and all of the single family roads. So if
Okay.
we ever have to repair those, we don't ever have to do anything to those.
okay.
The county would not take over the side roads and the parking spots, probably because they were like, we're not going to pay to pave your parking spots. So they didn't take these roads over. So that's why about half of Caprington Drive we own, the other half the county owns. So these expenses are solely for Caprington Drive from
The-
all the way to the entrance, and then all of this highlighted area, that's the townhome roads and parking lot.
Got it, makes sense.
But that's a good question, because I'm sure a lot of people are thinking like, well, is that the whole neighborhood or just one section? Just a section, because that's what our HOA owns, which if anyone goes to the GIS, he was supposed to update the map to show that that's part of our ownership, because before it showed like it was county ownership, which it wasn't. So that's the two big things. The other thing that we'll have to figure out is how we want to do the billing. I'll just go back to the main agenda for that one. So that way people that are watching it later on can see. So assessment billing options, I would say just keep it where townhomes have their expense, single families have their assessment expense like it's always been done. The other option would be to have townhomes have their monthly assessment, but then also have whatever their contribution is to the common as a separate payment. I think it's easy enough just to roll it all together because I've already done the work. So I don't think that's going to be as big of a deal. I would just say keep it the way it is. But if for some reason someone wants to change the billing, we could do that. The other potential budget options, if we make them fully responsible for their expenses in 2021, if we want to try to stagger the amount of increase, we could create their reserve contribution that's like that 2018 budget where it's graduated, where each year a little bit more has to get paid in. So it's not as big of a hit in year one. So we may want to look into that if that's something we want to do. We'll just need to decide that by the next meeting so I can put together a graduated scale too. If you're like, hey, we only want to raise it 30% or 25%, whatever the number is, then we'll have to create the contribution amount for their savings backloaded so they still end up at the same point they need to be to cover the costs.
Eric, can I interrupt for a moment to keep things simple so that you have some sort of guidance and plan? Can the board agree on a graduated scale that he can kind of go with at this point, either a 2-year or a 3-year plan versus a 1-year hit, so that he can just have a plan of some sort? Because otherwise it's going to, I mean, you can't ask him to give you like a 10-year, a 5-year, a 3-year, or 2, you know what I mean? So is it, with that, calling real quickly for a little bit of discussion on this, do you, understanding of course that we're going to have to increase the townhomes most likely, do you guys want to look at a 2-year graduated scale, a 3-year graduated scale? What does everybody feel comfortable with on that versus just a 1-year, so that he can give you some options?
The other option would be if we come up with, like, say, if after we get some general feedback and the townhomes are like, hey, if someone's like, hey, I'm on fixed income, I can't take that hit, I can't afford it, or whatever the case may be. If we make it like 20%, but then we have to stagger the reserve. So we could stagger it over the course of 20 years, but they're going to have to know going in that each year it's going to increase more to cover the deficit that needs to be put into that savings account. So there's multiple ways we can do it, because it could just all be how we do the reserve and graduate that, or we can have the entire expense staggered somehow.
Well, and that's where I think you guys have to consider that this board can say, okay, we're going to raise the dues over a period of 10 years, 5 years, whatever. next year's board could be an entirely different board, and they could say, we're never raising dues again. So we do need to put some sort of plan in place. And I'll be honest, I would probably recommend a shorter term plan than a long term plan. There's a real good possibility at least 3 of us could still exist over the next year or two. But in 3 years, this whole group may not even live in Omni Glen. They never know. So I think that's something to consider as we give some guidance here.
Yeah.
And what you say, Rob, makes total sense. And I just wanted, since I'm relatively new to the board, I just wanted to make sure I understand. It sounds to me, it makes sense that the board needs to make a decision of and vote regarding the split and the townhome. But I was wondering if it's something that we should consider for townhome owners to actually decide on the split, or it's up to us as a HOA members. If it will not impact our reserve budget overall, I don't have any preference on how townhome members will pay it, and if they prefer it for long-term or short-term. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if it's something that HOA members need to decide.
So the honestly, this is one of those things where the townhome owners had the opportunity to already vote for their elected officials. We are the board, and it's not only is it something we should do, it's actually our responsibility at this point, because it's a good question. It's a very good question, because somebody might say, well, why didn't you guys come and individually poll the townhome owners or something? But that's what we're elected for. So it's a very, very good question, and I'm actually glad somebody asked it.
Yeah, I guess it's just coming from the point of how much importance it's make for us. But yeah, I got you, and it's clear now.
Yeah, that's also why we were trying to get this together now. If people take the time to spend the hour and a half to watch it and understand what's going on, then they can give us some feedback.
This is what I was.
We make a final decision on it. But in terms of whether we want to put the entire hit on them in 2021, or if we want to have a graduated plan for 2 years or 3 years, that's something. If we want to just say, hey, we'll make it gradual over 2 or 3 years, so it's not going to be a 50% increase this year, we can do that. I just need to know that ahead of time so I can start working on it, so we have options next time we meet. I think that's what Rob was looking for right now, not the big decisions on the 2 things, because we can wait for feedback on that. But just if as a group you're like, hey, we're going to put that 40, probably I'm guessing 30 to 40% increase in 1 year, or if you want it to be like 25 and then another 25 the next year. Because really, once they get to that dollar amount, their dues aren't going to increase very much, because it'll already be graduated. It'll just be based on cost of living and whatever the percent increase in the budget. So once they get to the amount, like, it's not going to be sticker shock for any new owners, because it will be like less than probably 5 to 6% going forward. It's just getting them to that amount where it's getting covered initially.
So Virginia, do you have any thoughts on that time frame as far as that increase? And so we can give Eric maybe 1 or 2 options, so he can just come back to us with, it's either going to be a one-time increase of this much, or we can stagger it over 3 years at this much. Just a couple options, so we're not going crazy with a sliding scale that he has to come up with.
Eric, can you put it in a, like, can you give me an example of, we're talking what versus what? Because this is a lot of information.
Yeah. So right now, you guys.
Because I'm putting myself in the place of a townhome owner.
You still see my spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So right now, this is without the tweaks. So with the tweaks, the asphalt will be a little bit different. But with the asphalt the way it is before it gets modified, the 2021 annual contribution for single families would come out to $570. Townhomes would be $2,700, which is a 52% increase. When the asphalt gets factored in, I'm guessing it's probably going to be closer to like $2,500. So it's going to be like a 33% increase. And then single families should be close to what they're paying now when we redo the asphalt. So it should be closer to the $620 amount, and then probably a 30% increase for the townhomes. If we try to stagger that out, we can make it a lower increase.
I used to take coaching clients because I used to think I could
But
change
what's happened in the past has been the board hasn't necessarily wanted to raise the townhomes by a lot, and then they keep falling further behind what their contributions need to be to the savings. So now that it's getting split out, we don't have as much of a luxury to do that because they'll just fall so far behind they can't cover costs when the big expenses come up that need to be dealt with from the reserve study. That would be what their savings account is for. So it's basically like it'll be a 30 to 40% hit in year one, and then after that it's probably going to be like a 5% increase, just standard cost of living increase, or it'll be maybe a 20-25% increase in year one, then a 20-25% increase in year 2 or 3 until they're at the amount they're supposed to be at. So it's just if you want to spread it out where they get it all in 1 year, or they get it over the next 2 or 3 years, and it's 2 or 3 years of complaining
I'm
about
just thinking of if I were a townhome, I think people would maybe sometimes forget, and you'll have all these questions 2 and 3 years later, and you got new people coming in. Why is it going up another, chunk?
Yeah. I mean, for brand new people come in, I think it would be better to do it all at once. For people
Yeah, so I'm kind of
like, well, why the hell are you raising it?
for the
So how about, just for the sake of being able to present some options, how about a 1 year and a 2 year split, Eric? Because I feel like a 1 year, obviously we're all here, we can vote for that when we need to. A 2 year split, it's not too crazy to think that we can get, even if we're not on the board, we can scream and yell at the new board to get them to understand they need to do that 2 year increase. So how about bringing us 2 options? That'd be fair.
Okay.
Anybody any other thoughts on that? Want longer periods, or is 1 and a 2 year plan good to be able to present options?
Sounds good to me. Got to drop it. Just 1 to 2 years plan, so that way people can really easily understand it. And then if there's any questions, it would be out posted publicly. So anybody that have any questions, and they can email you or email the treasurer if they got anything other extra questions. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And then I'll make sure this is out publicly, so if people got extra questions or anything, then they can go back and look at this, and they can go back and get their own questions and understand it. But Eric, this is an excellent job. Excellent. I mean, the split. I've been on the board. This is gonna be my 5th year, 6th year, something like that, and never thought that it would ever be able to be split up. So kudos to you.
We just got to make some decisions and finalize it and go from there. But is there a timeline we're looking at? I know we have to have our budget done by first. It has to be 1 month before the start of the new budget term.
So I was going to ask, first of all, do you have more to present this evening, or is that are you at the point where you're like, there's where we are?
Once it's basically just waiting for those 2 decisions to get made on the initial split and then the asphalt, and then I can break everything down.
Okay, let's everybody take a look at our calendars here. How does next Tuesday to meet again to make some of these decisions sound? 13th of October.
I'll be here.
Same bat time, same bat channel, basically. Is anybody
Yep.
got a conflict?
No, I'm fine. I just can't do till 7:30 again, so I'll be racing home.
I'm fine too. Anytime after 5.
Okay, let's make sure that one will be a public meeting. We'll open the floor at the beginning of the meeting to anybody who happens to who watched this one, and I almost feel like we need like a secret password. Like if you know that it was bat time, that you get to actually speak right away. But we'll open the floor up at the beginning of the meeting for maybe a second time to watch the video and understand what's going on, and they want to ask some questions. That way the board is operating with the latest and greatest information from people who are, hey, I want to give some input on this. Then we'll discuss some of this stuff, and then I guess we might, I don't know, we might open the floor again at the end. I don't know, but our plan will be next week to address those 1, 2, 3 questions, right, Eric?
Next week would just need to be the initial split for how we want to break down the savings account. So that way everybody just skips to the end of the video can see the 2 important questions. First one would be reserve contribution calculation. So which of these 3 options were we picking, or if we're going to go completely off script and pick something else. So option 1 would be starting for next year, there's 330 some thousand in the common fund, 130 in the townhome fund. Option 3 is 150 in the common fund, 300 in the townhome fund. Option 2 is in the middle. Option 4, whatever you guys come up with, or some resident that wants to spend countless hours trying to figure out a better way, they can go for it. But that's the first decision we'll need. The second one will be what we're going to do for the asphalt. So how we want to break it down, if we want to have all of it stay at townhome expense, which I would not vote for, if we want to just make Caprington only as a common expense, or if we want to make all the roads a common expense and just the parking spots a townhome expense, or if you want to consider all of it, including the parking spots and all the roads common, because that'll be the 2 big items that I'll need to build the 1-year and 2-year budget.
Okay, so the meeting on the 13th, is it just us or it's open? I'm sorry.
That'll be we'll want to do an open meeting. So prior to that, we'll broadcast that out to folks through various sources. Just let them know, hey, we're having a board meeting on the 13th. Here's the place it'll be. I'll make sure that the final numbers that Eric put together here, I know he did some adjustments tonight, so we'll put everything into a Google Drive folder, and we'll make that folder available on the website. And the beginning of that meeting, I'll probably open the floor up. Depends on how many people are here. I'll split up some time and just tell people, hey, you've got 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, to make it reasonable. That'll give people a chance to say, hey, I watched the meeting. Here's my thoughts on some of the stuff you guys said before you do any voting tonight. And that way we as a board can have a discussion.
Okay. What time's our meeting going to be?
Same thing, 7:30 tonight. Work for everybody?
7:30.
7:30. Okay.
Yeah.
And people can't say they couldn't get home from work in time.
And they can, it's a Zoom meeting. They
Like
can't
it's
get
a
lost.
any electronic.
Cool. Any other thoughts or questions before we go tonight? And again, making sure people understand that we didn't make a big deal out of making this one public, because we intended to make this video and the documents available so people could go back. The next meeting will be a public option, and you will have the ability to speak. So, cool. Anything else?
Can we not record real quick? I got something real quick.
Okay. So we'll if nobody's got anything else, for the good of the order here, we'll end the recording. Then we can converse before we're done. All right.
The recording and save it without losing it while we stay on.
If yes.
If you don't, Eric's got to make this whole video himself again.